Hello, I'm George and this is GLLR Cars. Welcome to the channel. Today we're talking the 2020 BMW 330i. BMW 330i is the smaller engine version of the BMW 3 Series. There's a BMW 340i, and then the I designation means that is the car that has the 4-cylinder engine instead of the 6-cylinder engine. There is an X-Drive version of the car, and that would be the one that has the 4-wheel drive. So as you can see, this one here is rear-wheel drive, 4-cylinder engine. This 4-cylinder engine is turbocharged, so it will give you 255 horsepower, and although that number seems somewhat modest for a BMW, this is a smaller, lighter car, and it is known to perform very well. We've seen it in some other BMWs of this kind. For this 2020 year model, one of the things that we see is that this car is slightly larger. They increased the dimensions of the car a little bit, and because of that, sometimes if people see it from far away, they may mistake it for a different BMW. It's a gorgeous red interior with a very nice rims, and what I like is that they didn't go crazy with the kidney grills. BMW has been going crazy putting really large kidney grills on many of his newer cars, and I'm a little bit more of a traditionalist with the small ones there. So good job there. And the car looks very, very luxurious. The way that it's packaged, it doesn't look very crazy. It's still somewhat modest in terms of its looks, but it's still very luxurious and very sporty. Some things that are fairly new is the fact that the proximity sensor of your key fob would allow you to approach the car, determine that you have the keys in your pocket, and go ahead and unlock and swipe the mirror open. So when you're ready to go, you're ready to go. You can even set it up to even have like pre-ventilate the car, so when by the time you get in, it's not going to be as hot. Same thing happens when you leave it. Close the door, and as you walk away, after a certain distance, it's going to lock the car up. So I'm standing maybe about 15 feet away from the car, and that's about the distance from which it's going to unlock the car. So all in all, it's a car that is very good looking, is a very popular car, and it is a car that is surprisingly spacious. One of the things that I like to talk about is, you know, if you get a car like this, normally you don't get it because of you want to have a lot of capacity in it. As after all, it's a small car, is a compact car. So if I get here, let me get this cup out of the way here, and I have this chair pretty much almost all the way back. I like to drive with the chair really far back, so I don't like my legs to get cooped up. And despite that, I still have like a good 4 inches of knee space. In terms of head space, I still have maybe about 1.5 inches or so of head space. So not too bad, and I feel very comfortable back here. And for a compact car, this, I mean, the space, the use of space is quite impressive. I'm going to take a look at the trunk real quick. Trunk space is pretty decent. It does have the ability to fold in 3 different spots. So that is a 20% fold in the middle, and those are 40/40s. So it just works out if you have something long that you need to put in there. Little space here on the sides for small items, but all in all, it's probably gets it done, unless you really want a lot of storage space. A car like this will get it done. Now I wanted to show you what it looks like when you first step in the inside and what the driver has presented. When you first get into the car, you look at your screen both in your instrument cluster and your infotainment system, and when you hit the start button, which is now is located in the center stack, and how it lights up your instrument cluster, what the driver is presented with, what your infotainment looks like, etc. To look at some storage space, it's got a little bit of space here. It's a little bit bigger than what I've seen before. Got a USB port there and a little bit of space there. I think don't expect to have a lot of storage when it comes to a car like this. Glove compartment, same thing, and storage area for your phone here and cup holders. One thing to cover is basically the infotainment system. I haven't really gone into more detail on the infotainment system or the instrument cluster. Let's start with the instrument cluster. The instrument cluster, I talked about it briefly on previous BMWs that I reviewed. When they came up with this type of configuration, it will have the speedometer on the left hand side, and then for the sake of space they put the tachometer in a reverse configuration, so the needle is actually going counterclockwise as opposed to where you normally see it going clockwise, with the maps in the center, but you still get all kinds of alerts and various icons that pop up based on what you're trying to do here. This area here where it's showing basically horsepower and torque, that can be adjusted to display different functions. If I were to, for instance, turn on the radio, and I can do it over here by pressing there. So I'm gonna go ahead and lower the volume there so you're gonna get distracted by that. But if I turn on the radio and then I spin this wheel here, it's gonna look for the radio stations that I'm tuned in, and it changes the display there. If, let's say I go to ESPN there, it tunes into that, and if I don't do anything else with the wheel and I'm just driving along, nothing's going to happen by itself. It's going to have a timeout and go back to this display. But with the buttons on the side here, I can actually show different information that would be shown in that center section right there. So again, very configurable. Well, I wouldn't say that. Let me rephrase that. It's not very configurable. It is somewhat limited, but it is better than the traditional analog gauges that we've seen in BMWs from the past. For a traditionalist, the old-fashioned analog gauges are the right of the purist. For someone like me that I like technology, I always enjoy whenever the old gauges are replaced with a digital display, and the reason being is the changes on digital display can be determined by software changes. If you think about, once you have the construct for doing digital dashboards, you can change the colors, you can change the themes, you can change whatever you want. And in fact, to some degree, we do get a little bit of that. We get a change that happens when I switch from comfort mode to eco mode to sports mode. So it does do it a little bit, and that is the benefit of being able to do a digital display. The other thing that I like, and it's on the infotainment system, again, this is not something new, it's not something for 2020, but what happened was they made the screen where you can still have the iDrive, you can still control it with the wheel, and you can go up, down, left, right, clockwise, counterclockwise, and then you can, you have your back buttons, whatever. You also have a touchscreen, so you can actually swipe through what you want to see. And it's nice to have that option, because some folks rather have the touchscreen. Myself, personally, I'm okay with this iDrive. The fact that it shows both, it basically offers options for the folks. So again, lots of customizations here. Something else to talk about, the main menu items, although you do have like these widgets that you get to set up, besides the widgets, your main menu items are the ones in the left. So if I were to just say, I don't know, let's look at the car widget. I go down here, arrow to the left, press on car, and then this pops into, let's say, vehicle status. Click on vehicle status, tire pressure. Here's something to point out. All green means it's all good. 3D animation with all 4 wheels, making sure that everything's okay. Want to know what's the actual pressure? I press down on the iDrive, and it's going to actually show me the breakdown of pounds per square inch of pressure on each of the 4 tires. Go back, same thing. And as I rotate through the various items, I'm not going to go one by one. You see an animation of the vehicle in its original color, spinning, showing the various widgets on the things that you want to see. And when the folks at BMW decided to put this together, they thought about why create boring menu items where they're just all text, but rather let's throw in some images, and it does make it look a little bit better. It's sort of like you have a PowerPoint presentation and it's nothing but text. Yeah, it's going to get the job done, but it's going to be a boring presentation. If you add some images, it's just going to make the presentation a little bit more livelier, and that's what they did here with this infotainment system. And I mean, it goes on and on. I basically have, I was just under the car. You have your navigation settings, you have your communication settings, and this system of iDrive has been around for so long that there really hasn't been, all the bugs were worked out a while back. And it's gotten to the point where they got it down to this thing is pretty solid. I've owned BMWs for a while. I've had several BMWs, and I am yet to see an issue on the iDrive. I know some of you maybe have, let me know about it, but personally I never really had any issues, and that's probably because I never had, maybe some of the older BMWs with the iDrive was one of the earlier versions, but on these newer versions, they're basically pretty rock solid. A few other things to talk about. This is something that I've heard on comments where folks think that the layout, or at least like these temperature controls, the climate controls that it has here, that it's not as appealing as other cars like Audi, for instance, or maybe even Mercedes. What I do like is that it's very functional. It may not be as pretty. I don't think it's actually ugly. It may not be as pretty, or it may not be as good looking as those other vehicles, but it is very functional. Same thing here with these are not like radio controls. It's more like shortcut buttons, and that's something that BMW's been doing for a while, and it's no different. It basically is, you want to program a menu item, you want to program a radio station, you want to program whatever it is, you set it up in any of those buttons, and you can get to it pretty quickly. In terms of the rest of the interior, it has something that is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. Even though it does have those cup holders there, wireless charging, USB connector, I don't like the fact that BMW puts it very close to the this infotainment system. So if most of you maybe just have small cups and drinks, but if you have like a coffee little mug and one of those skinny little tall mugs, it's actually going to block part of this right here. In fact, I may have one lying around. Here's one right here that I use when I'm drinking my coffee. As you can see, if I put it there, if I need to press the radio controls, I need to kind of put my finger all the way around it. If I need to get to some of these shortcut buttons, this kind of gets in the way. So I would probably like to see a change where BMW will maybe relocate these buttons, not the button, sorry, relocate these cup holders either to the side or a little further back. I know that space is at a premium. And then this takes us now to where the center controls are, and for the most part they are unchanged. I do like the fact that for the last couple of years they did the start button here in that center control stack here, as opposed to here on the side of the steering wheel, so it's a little bit easier to access. The shifter is still electronic. It doesn't really move the it's not like a knob that you're moving. It's more like an electronic shifter that will change the position of the car based on where you move it, and to put it in park you just press that button. The parking and auto hold, the different drive modes, and of course the iDrive. So basically no surprises here, but in terms of the interior, the car is very well laid out. I do like that they did a more luxurious experience. The seating, even though this is not one of the higher end models, is better. The layout of the materials, even though this right here may not be leather wrapped like in some other cars, it's not a hard plastic. It's basically, you can see that it's very squishy. It's like a material that it's a little bit softer. The combination of colors, and usually light interiors make a car feel a little bit bigger. I don't usually like to drive light interior, cars that have a light interior, because it tends to wear a little bit quicker. But they did a pretty good job in this car with that. And then of course the sunroof is not panoramic, but is big enough that you do get a very good experience if you want to have like a little bit more I guess the appeal or the appearance that it is bigger by opening up that sunroof up there. First impressions, the ride feels very, very strong. Like, it looks like it was set up pretty stiff. So even, or I guess, yeah, the ride is pretty stiff, which normally is not a good thing, but it is good in terms of handling. So as the car goes through some little bumps and things on the road, you do feel it a little bit, but it is that trade-off that you get just because of how stiff they make the suspension in a car like this. And right now, by the way, I have it in comfort mode. So if I were to change it, and here is where I would put it in sports mode, car changes to sports mode, it'll feel a little bit stiffer. And the transmission, it went to a slightly lower gear, so I can punch it a little bit. Yep. So for a car that has 255 horsepower, when you punch it, you feel it pretty quick. There is a tiny delay because it is turbocharged, but you do feel it surprisingly quick. So at least whenever I'm driving it and I know that I need to pass, change lanes and pass or whatever, yeah, I do know that it's like a quarter of a second delay, but it does have punch. And this surprises me because a 255 horsepower number is not usually a big number, but for a car that is relatively small, it's adequate power. It's a little bit better than adequate. It's pretty slippy. It can get around pretty quick, so it feels light on its feet. And I have no problem just being able to punch it past cars as needed. It's no racing demon, but the car is light and the car is small, so I can get up to speed pretty quick as I do that, as I punch it. The other thing that I notice is that in sports mode, which is what I have right here, it does have a surprisingly good sound for a 4-cylinder engine. The sound is not going to be a deep growl like you will see in a larger engine, but it is sound that would show you that, yeah, you are in something a little bit nicer than just a regular cruising car. This is a sporty vehicle, so it does show its capability that way. The other thing is the steering. When I make a turn, it feels very precise. The steering, as I said before, in BMWs doesn't have as much feedback as the steering from BMWs from the past, and that's probably because they made it more electronic. Hopefully the camera caught that. The sound is quite impressive for a 4-cylinder engine, turbocharged. So it does feel very sporty, very light on its feet, very nimble. The stiffness of the suspension makes it allow you to make turns without feeling that body roll over, not feeling that weight come on each side. So this car was very well put together, and believe it or not, this is the entry-level model. This is not the one that has more power. There is one that has more power, and this one is not even it. This one is not by any means a cheap car. It starts at about $40,000 to $41,000 for a 330i. There's a 330i X-Drive that basically is the 4-wheel drive version of the 330, and that one starts at $43,000. So it's not a cheap car, but you get what you pay for. I recently drove a Volvo on my last video, as a matter of fact. It was a Volvo S60. The Volvo S60 is a car that competes in the same category as this car, the Audi A4, the Mercedes-Benz C-Class. So it's In my video, I talked about that maybe it's not meant to, it's a different type of car, but my surprise in the driving capabilities of that car made me think about, now that I got back into a BMW and I drove basically the leading car when it comes to sporty small sedans, the 3 Series, it reminded me why this is the leader and why this is the benchmark that other cars are measured by. And that is because the driving feel. It is unmistakably better. As good as that Volvo was, this one is unmistakably better. So if you're looking for a car that is in a different price point, if that's the motivation, then it's price, that's different. But if all else is the same and the prices are the same, I would recommend this one over the Volvo. It's just a joy to drive. There's no mistake about it. Okay, so what was it like to drive it? It was probably not a surprise in terms of the expectations that BMW has created for the users. The fact that it is the benchmark for most of those small four-door cars that are sporty and luxurious at the same time, and where the driving experience reminds you of why it is a benchmark. In that sense, it was not a surprise. In the sense that it was a surprise was because the car, despite all of the competition that is out there and the different cars that have been made to try to compete with this car, they haven't gotten the recipe as right as BMW has gotten this recipe. So how do they get it right? I cannot speak about how they do it because I don't know about the details of when this car gets manufactured and all of the things that they do. That's probably a different channel if you want to look at how that gets engineered. But what I can talk about is the driving experience, and to this day, cars in this segment will do a good job, and by no means do they mean that they are a bad driving experience. The C-Class, the A4 Audi, the Volvo S60 that I drove recently, they do a very good job and they are a joy to drive. But this is still the benchmark. And if you ever get a chance to drive one, drive it after you've driven some of the competitors, and then you'll understand why. This is my car of choice if I were looking for a compact sports luxury car. And now more than ever, now that it's slightly bigger, because I like cars to be a little bit bigger, now more than ever, I would buy a car like this. My name is George, this is GLLR Cars, and as always, drive safe.